I'm Sam Singer, and I'm an associate at Stikeman Elliott, currently practicing in the tax department, and I'm also a proud graduate of both the undergraduate program at law as well as the LLM program here at McGill, where the previous Stikeman chair, zany, single-minded Stikeman chair, was my supervisor. And I have the pleasure of moderating this panel, as well as the one that follows. This first panel has Professor Leyla, who will be speaking to us about developing countries and the globalization of tax lawmaking, Turkish tax law reform, and fighting tax evasion. She's currently multitasking in a rather intimidating way. She's the Associate Professor of Tax Law at the Istanbul Kurmurburgaz University in Turkey, while also completing her PhD at the University of Wisconsin. Not intimidating at all. And Professor Dean here is a professor at Brooklyn Law School, where he's widely published on a wide variety of tax and budget issues, including, and I think this will be particularly exciting for many of us, tax havens, regulatory complexity and tax shelters, as well as social enterprises. Professor Atesh will have 15 minutes to present, followed by 5 minutes from Professor Dean as a discussant, and then we'll have 9.5 minutes of audience participation. Thank you.
Hi. First of all, I would like to thank McGill University and Symposium and our team, and also for organizing this symposium and giving me a chance to present my paper. My research question is, to what extent, how and why tax law reforms affect the fight against tax evasion and avoidance in developing countries. And my hypothesis is domestic constraint of tax law reform on fighting tax evasion and avoidance are different for developing countries than developed countries. And the objective of my study is to identify these constraints. Turkey has experienced two major tax reforms after 1990. Tax reform of 1998 focused on domestic tax evasion and avoidance. Tax reform of 2006 focused on international tax evasion and avoidance. Now I will tell you briefly the legislative process and the content of these two tax law reforms. And the story of tax reform of 1998 started in the beginning of the 1990s, and Turkey confronted with a large public sector deficit, and international institutions recommended Turkey to increase tax revenue, mainly concentrating on curbing large-scale domestic tax evasion. And the Union of Chambers and Commodity Exchange of Turkey, which is very influential over domestic politics, was very aware of the tax need reform in Turkey and set up an ad hoc commission, tax commission, in 1991, which consists 30 members, 5 high revenue officials, 7 academicians and 1 secretariat, and it prepared a report, published the report, and opened public discussion. And besides several solutions in the recommendation for Turkish tax system, it presents some solution for curbing tax evasion. Turkey, these are the recommendations. The strong one, strong to the last one. And I want to tell you what is the declaration of tax system. And according to Turkish income tax code, gross income is gains from specific sources defined in tax law. Taxing a person under income tax rules is not possible without showing a nexus between the gain and one of the specific sources. But declaration of wealth requires mandatory declaration of wealth and spending every year of tax year. when an increase in taxpayer wealth could be seen comparing his two following declarations, but was not able to explain based on his income tax return. Tax definition could assess additional tax, even his tax score did not deduce such an income realization. But report said maybe the government was not able to present this wealth declaration system because of economic and political concern. And that happened. Political concern and economic reasons prevailed, and the government was not able to or hesitated to introduce wealth declaration system until tax reform of 1998. And the reform didn't exactly introduce tax declaration system, but introduced gross income definition, which has similar effect. And according to the definition, gross income was received and gains from all sources and will be subject to income tax law according to the net accretion of one of the economic power between 2 points of time by side. So, what is and this reform never implemented. This reform, we passed the law, but we never implemented it. Because Turkey confronted, economy went into recession, and all economic shortcomings were attributed to the tax reform by politicians and press. And the government has postponed it. And then we confronted two economic crises. We call it twin crisis, and we signed an IMF agreement. We had signed 19 all of them, and started to implement a standby program. 2000 elections established the Justice and Development Party as the predominant political party, and he said we will continue this stabilization program. And also he initiated an urgent action plan, and as a part of this plan, they postponed the law, tax reform. One thing I'm sorry. And new participation approach is interesting. I should mention, traditionally the Ministry of Finance had conducted law preparation work in secrecy. And the Ministry of Finance had not reviewed a draft list before referring to the Council of Ministers. But starting with this law, Ministry of Finance was shared the draft with public for consideration. And since this reform, Turkey has no major legislative effort for fighting domestic tax evasion and avoidance. We have some administrative effort, but no legislative effort. The second reform, 2006, the magnitude of profit shifting out of developing countries, including Turkey, are not known. However, Turkey was influenced by the debated issue and introduced some mechanism for fighting cross-border income tax evasion and avoidance. And these are the new provisions in our new corporate income tax code. And the Parliament discussed and passed the bill in the same day. There's a slide missing. The former tax reform of 1998, there are against vote, but in this law reform, no against vote. And also, we see participation efforts in this tax reform process. And we see influential institutions, World Bank and TOP. In respect implementation, Turkey has problems like other developing countries for transfer pricing because of the lack of the basis and experts. And when we compared it to this reform, to tax reform, and although many were allowed to provide comment and inputs, only the Ministry of Finance had the authority to channel this input to the final draft. So these are top-down reforms, but there is a difference in the participation respect. The 1990 tax reform, all stakeholders were heard during drafting whether public law or not, but the law was drafted as close to the goals of legislature. So it was seen to be effective on paper but not on the ground. But according to the 2000 tax reform, it was imported through legal transplantation. No stakeholders were familiar with the rules and their effect on them, and they didn't intend to affect the content. We have similar experience actually, not the fighting for tax evasion and avoidance. We have two big tax reforms in Turkish tax history. We introduced modern income taxation in 1949, and also we introduced VAT in 1984. Both tax reforms were not criticized in the parliament, like 2000 tax reform. And now, I think two tax reforms show that participation pillar of democracy is not strong in Turkey in respect of tax reform. Now I want to mention a recent event in Turkey for showing that accountability pillar of democracy also is missing. And as you know, all the familiar exchange of information has been accepted the most effective tool to combat cross-border taxation and avoidance. And Turkey was not immune to this international trend, and he brought some legal change. He signed exchange of information agreements, signed but not ratified Convention on Mutual Administrative Assistance in tax matter, and added some new provisions to its double tax treaties. But we see a corruption scandal, big corruption scandal. Two of AKP government ministers were arrested under corruption, bribery, fraud, money laundering, and gold smuggling on December 7th, 2013. And after that time, top officials from Turkish Revenue Administration and Turkish Financial Intelligence Unit and 1/5 of all judges and public prosecutors who are believed to be associated with Islamic community of Fethullah Gülen, who has lived in United States for a long, long time. And that is also believed started the corruption investigation procedure against the AKP government, have been transferred to lower level positions since December 17, 2013. So, the question for is knowing enough. You know, we have all these legal chains for benefiting the international tax cooperation environment, but tax administration must know the income of the taxpayer and also be able to enforce the law. So, my conclusion, I believe democracy helps us to design tax reform that are more likely to lead us curb tax evasion and avoidance. And international community should devote more its effort instead of IT technologies and human resources to participation and democracy aspects of tax reform, of fighting tax evasion and avoidance in Turkey. Thank you for listening to me.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you, Professor Artesh, for a really interesting paper. Of course, thank you to Professor Christians and her team, her minions, for making everything go smoothly so far. Should I say that right? Am I going to jinx you? Sorry. So, what I wanted to say is maybe a useful way of framing what we're going to be doing for the next few days, but also, most specifically, in response to Professor Artesh's work. And the paper itself is very interesting. She claims it's just a start, but I found it very interesting, and also from a larger project, which I look forward to seeing one day. To think about the role that tax reform is playing today in the domestic stage and also globally, I think a key concept for us to think about is legitimacy. There was a time when the tax law didn't need to work so hard to seize, claim legitimacy, but those days are over. The days when each government collected tax to pay the fire department and so on. And there was no question of international tax evasion and avoidance, if such a day ever existed, is no longer. And today, it's important, both in terms of just voluntary compliance, tax morale, however you describe it, that our tax regimes, domestic and international, have a strong sense of legitimacy. And legitimacy can be broken down along a variety of dimensions. Traditionally, one way of doing it might be input legitimacy versus output legitimacy. So input legitimacy being sort of the process through which a rule comes into being. It comes to the legislature. It's therefore legitimate because the legislature is giving it its stamp of approval. Or there are other ways that you can acquire, law can acquire input legitimacy. And the other basic type of legitimacy is output legitimacy. Does it work? Right? So laws that are imposed not through a legitimate process can acquire legitimacy just by function. Right? They're very different types of legitimacy, but there are two different flavors of it. And when Professor Ateş wrote about different forms that happened in Turkey, in the presentation in the paper, you focused on the 98 and 06 reforms, but I was also curious about the 93 and 94 reforms. And you'll correct me, but from your paper, it seemed like the 93 reform was really domestic. Right? It was a domestic reform. The Prime Minister took an ad in the paper. Was that right?
Yes.
A big ad in the paper proclaiming this tax reform as a way of just acquiring
economic tourism, the new law.
Oh, right, about economic terrorism. That tax evasion avoidance was a form of economic terrorism. Then, sort of, the next year, the 94 reform was imposed by the IMF or encouraged strongly.
Yes.
Imposed maybe too strong. Gently encouraged by the IMF. But they both succeeded, or maybe 94 succeeded even more than 93. Wasn't clear. But when you think about what's different about the Turkish context as opposed to the U.S. or some other jurisdiction, there's obviously a role that international organizations play that they might not play as prominently in other jurisdictions. So you could break down legitimacy into input legitimacy along another dimension, sort of externally imposed legitimacy, sort of borrowing some legitimacy from the IMF, not quite the same as a legislature, but helpful in a way. And then the legitimacy you get from the domestic political process, putting the ad in the paper, saying you're going to fight economic terrorism, really interesting. Can't believe that was in 93. It's really amazing. Anyway, so with that, I want to stop, leave time for broader debate. But I do want us to, as we go on for the next few days, to think about the role that tax justice, these notions are playing in enhancing tax legitimacy. I think it really is important both in the domestic context as it is in the international law context. How do you get everybody to comply with international law? Has compliance pull? I see strong parallels to the tax reform process as a way of generating legitimacy for on the domestic front as well.